As an international hotel and luxury interior photographer for over 20 years, I have photographed some really nice tile. But it wasn't until I received this request on my TikTok that I'd ever considered photographing just the tile before it was installed in the luxe hotel room. Why would you do that? So my friend here is asking how Halumin will work on individual pieces of tile, and to properly show this, I found a challenge. This is a pure white, smooth, glossy 3x6 piece of beveled field tile. And this other piece is a crackled gray tile with a rippled glaze. Both of them are relatively featureless, and because of that, it's going to be a challenge to bring out any details when there are hardly any details to work with. So let's get going. A popular go-to for quick product photography is the light tint. I'm not a huge fan of the light tint, mainly for its lack of versatility, but also I just find the light it produces really boring. Anyway, just as a starting example, I captured these two angles of the tile, and they are about as vanilla as the color of the tile itself. Now, let's set up our Halumin Freestyle set. Today we're going to be using the H18 powered by 2 speed lights and only one of its accessory legs. The whole setup is ready to go in under 5 minutes, and it's going to be the only lighting and the only lighting modifier that we're going to be using for these images. That's it, nothing else. It's fast, it's small, and it's portable. So you could be doing this photo shoot in the tile store if you wanted to. You saw with the light tint that diffused light created not a lot of contrast. You really couldn't see anything. You couldn't make out the shape of the tile. You couldn't see anything particularly interesting in it. With Halumin, we're going to use the geometry of open cylindrical lighting to our advantage, and we're going to bring out the contours of that tile and the different facets of the edges. Starting by laying it flat on the table so that we have the light coming in at a really low angle. The light control rings are both facing inward. We have both flashes set at the same intensity so that we've got an even light wrapping around the whole tile, so everything is going to be consistent. And we're just going to look at that, and then we're going to figure out what to do from this point on. So there you can see, this is the base shot. You see that we have the edge of that tile really well illuminated, while the contours, the top part, those facets, are still a little bit flat because once again, we've got an even light. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna play with the light control rings a little bit and see what we can do with that to bring it out without changing the intensity of the lights. We're just using the geometry of the Halumin to make it work. So I'm gonna start by just opening up the top part of this one light control ring. That's it. So just about a quarter of this flap, the top flap going upward. That's the only change. And let's take a look and see what we get with that. So you can see in this image, we've started to get a little bit of that bevel to show just by opening up one part of the top ring. I'm gonna go ahead and open up the bottom flap on that same quarter of this ring. And that's going to let more light out. So basically each one of these flaps takes up a third of the actual light. So it covers about a third of it. Because this ring is pointed down, I'm going to use the accessory leg here, and it's going to hold it up. That's also going to change the way the light interacts with the tile. So we've got the 2 light control rings that are both open on this quarter of the ring, and then we've got the Halumin lifted at an angle, and it's about, I'd say about 4 inches off of this side. So that's the only change. We've still got both lights set at the same intensity. A quarter of this light control ring is open on the top and the bottom, and the accessory leg is lifting the Halumin up at an angle. So that's going to shift that whole plane of light to the side. And the idea is that we're going to flood more light on these 2 sides of the tile while we keep the light narrow on the other two sides. That should create a situation where all four facets of that surrounding, that surround the center of that tile are slightly different intensities, and that will bring out the shape a little bit. I haven't tested this, so we're just gonna take a crack at it and see what happens. And we will experience this together. All right, let's have a look. Okay, so we are still a little bit flat, and I think what is happening here is that because we raised up the Halumin, it's now at an angle that softens a little too much. So what I'm gonna do now is raise up the tile. The magic happens when you're in the center of that staging area, that point where you're right in the middle of the depth of Halumin. I think by raising it up, we'll create a harder light on it and more of an angle, and that will really accentuate that depth of those facets. So I'm just gonna take this wood block and I'm gonna set the tile up on top of it like so. All right, so now that tile is sitting 3.5 inches because it's a 2x4, and as you know, they're no longer 4 inches. So 3.5 inches off of the back of that white foam core. So there's some distance between that and the background. That'll soften the background out and we won't be able to see any of the grain of the paper. But it's also now right in the middle of that staging area, and I think that we're gonna get some more interesting results. Now look at that. You can see the depth, and you can see what I was talking about. There is more light coming out of these two sides, less light coming out of these two sides, and the light on these sides is lower. It's coming in at an angle, so it's almost backlighting the tile. It's coming at a really hard angle of attack on these two sides, and that's creating these darker facets here, whereas the light here is higher, it's softer, and it is brighter because there's 2/3 more light exposed on this side. And so that is bringing out every single one of those sides has a different intensity on it. The top has that light gray, and then you can also see that it's not a perfectly straight bevel. It has a little bit of a slope in it. So you're really seeing all the character of that tile shape, as well as that edge is really well defined around the perimeter of the tile. And now we can really see what that tile is. And again, this was not anything difficult. That's one accessory leg up. We've got the two speed lights set at the same power, which is 55% power. And then we've got the tile that is lifted 3.5 inches off of the face of the background. So it's just sitting on a table, like there's no additional equipment, and the Halumin is the only thing doing the lighting. Let's shoot another angle where we're looking into this big window of light that we've created, because part of the interesting thing is when you're dealing with shiny stuff, a part of what makes a shiny image interesting is the glare. When you're photographing shiny things, you're not necessarily using the projected light to photograph them, you're using the glare. That's really interesting. So I think that the tile is too dark, and we're going to fix that. Just gonna move it a little bit closer to the Halumin edge. So let's try this again. And what we're really trying to do, if you're thinking about the angle that light is hitting it, trying to get a little bit of that glare to just bounce off of the facets of that tile. Okay, so this is a different angle that's basically giving the same effect. And what I'd like to see is a glare. So I'm gonna lay the tile back flat on the white because now I can get down really low, and I should be able to bounce that reflection right into it, and we can play with that a little. That creates a really pretty, you can tell that it's shiny, and when you're photographing shiny things, it's really important. You don't want to get rid of the shine completely, or you can't tell it's shiny. They start to look milky. You can't see any little bit of a shine. So with this, we've got that liquid kind of a flow with the white, and that creates a really interesting texture. But you can see on that edge, this top edge here is still a little bit dark. This front edge has some light on it, but then there's a shadow on the background. And this top edge here has a lot more, it's a lot brighter than the white background. So that's a different way of doing it once again. But that's actually nice. It looks glassy, but it's still very readable as to what it is, where the glare does not compete with the shape of the tile. So here's a different type of tile, and it's light gray with a little cracked patina on it. It doesn't have the bevel that the white tile that we worked with had, but it has kind of an uneven, wavy kind of a glaze on it. And that's something that is not easy to see. If I hold that and get it right on the studio light, just like that, you can see it's not a perfectly smooth surface like the other one. So that'll be kind of a challenge, like to bring that out. And again, we're gonna be doing that with the glare. So I'm gonna do the same thing. I haven't changed this setup at all. And I'm gonna set this tile down right there. So we're closer to this corner that's opened up. And then we're going to photograph it from this angle so that we can get some of that glare in. All right, let's have a look at the first image right here. I've just got that lined up in that corner. It's the same angle that I was using with the white tile in that angle. And because we've got that glare, you can now see the unevenness of that glaze coming across the top of the tile. So it has all the benefits. It shows that there's the depth to the tile, but you also see the glare. But that glare is telling the story of that uneven glaze that's on the tile.